3. Hi everyone. Today we are joined by Lotte Baert, teaching assistant and PhD researcher at Ghent University. Her research focuses on soil amendments and drought resilience and explores how different materials such as compost, chitin, and other amendments influence soil water retention under changing climate conditions, combining greenhouse gas experiments with field studies. So alongside her research, she's actively involved in teaching and bringing together scientific investigation and academic training in her daily work. Welcome to the podcast, Lotte.
Thank you for inviting me, Nazirke.
So let's immediately start with the direct questions related to your studies, which I think is very relevant in today's context. So why soil amendments are essential in today's agricultural practices?
Yeah, so I think current agricultural practices, they are experiencing many challenges, I would say. And climate change is for sure one that's very important these days. For Western Europe, we know that, it's predicted at least, that we will have a more intense dry periods combined to intense rainfall periods. And my research then mainly focuses on those intense dry periods. How can we weapon our soils against those dry periods to make sure that our crops survive those dry periods? But also at the same time, if we use an amendment to improve those soil conditions, we have to avoid that this soil amendment also influences greenhouse gas emissions from soil. So the combination of both sides is actually included in my topic, and I'm mainly investigating ecological soil amendments. Again, within the scope of we don't want to cause a new problem while creating a solution for something that's happening. So that's also the main vision of my PhD, and I really think that's important when doing so.
Yeah, I think that's also a very essential point. You mentioned that while creating new innovations, we should also consider that they are not harming the environment. On this context, of course, it's also interesting to ask what are the soil amendments selected and why?
Yeah. So first of all, I have multiple types of composts that I'm testing. Composting is a very common practice in agriculture. But the exact effect on soil moisture retention is something that's still investigated. So that's why it's also included in my research. But I also tested multiple novel soil amendments, I would say. For example, I tested sewage sludge pellets, biochar, different types of plant fibers, seaweed powder, but also the product chitin. And I had some remarkable results with this last one. So that's why my research mainly started to focus on this product after my broad test with many types of amendments. And maybe this chitin is not known very well, but actually it's the second most abundant polymer in nature. You can find it in many places, but one of or certain sources that are very frequently where you can find it very frequently is, for example, the exoskeleton of insects, but also in the shells of crustacea. And that brings me again to the renewable idea of my PhD, because, for example, the shells of the crustacea, they are a byproduct of the fisheries. So they are actually a waste stream that I'm trying to use as soil amendment. And if we're talking about those insects where we could use the exoskeleton from, we know that we could actually grow these insects on organic waste streams that we are generated as humans. So in that way, it's again a circular way to produce those amendments. And so since I had some interesting results with this chitin, I finally also tested the combination of chitin with compost in order to obtain a chitin-enriched compost, which was also included in my tests. And my tests mainly consisted of greenhouse experiments. So I mix my treatments with different soil textures. Since I'm talking about drought, it are mainly the coarse textures that I'm investigating. So the sandy to the loamy soils. So I have my soils, I mix them with my treatments. And then I plant a lettuce plant inside to also see the effects on the crop growth and the development of the crop over time. And then I let it grow for 8 weeks. I have then different water regimes to also simulate the effect of different, you could call it climates, but of course it's only the water regime that's different. But to see the effect of different moisture conditions on the functioning of those soil amendments on soil properties. And then after 8 weeks, I harvest my lettuce and I sample my soil. And that's the moment when I will determine the effect of the soil amendment on soil properties. So that's an important remark. My amendments always have about 8 weeks to settle in the soil and to let the effects happen, let's say. While in literature, it's often either a lab experiment where you immediately mix your product with soil and directly test what's happening. You have very few field experiments where you can really monitor the effect over a longer time period. I would say my experiments are a bit in the middle. There is some incubation time, I would say, about 8 weeks. So that's mainly the type of experiments that I'm carrying out with those soil amendments.
Again, congratulations. You just recently had also one publication, quite interesting and related to the chitin-enriched compost and to increase soil moisture retention. It can increase soil moisture retention in contextual circumstances. Quite interesting. Also relevant to the climate change because we don't expect we expect very dynamic changes. So can you elaborate on this?
Yeah, so indeed, we had a very successful experiment, I would say. So we had multiple treatments. So we had different compost types. I tested pure chitin, and then I tested this chitin-enriched compost, the one that I was talking about before. And so, interestingly, when we tested the pure compost, so without amendment of chitin, we actually saw no or only very slight changes in plant available water. And then when we apply chitin, so pure chitin, no compost in this treatment, we already saw a significant increase in plant available water. But then if we mix both products, so compost and chitin combined into chitin-enriched compost, it was then that we saw the largest effects on plant available water. So interesting to see how the combination of both products actually help each other in the functioning of soil. I have to add to this that it was also dependent on the water regime under which I was testing this. The results I'm talking about now were only for one of the water regimes that I tested. So again, this is also one of the main messages of my research is that it's often people fall back into generalizing results like, this will always work or this does not work at all. But I think context is really important. Certain treatments will be very well for certain soil types, certain water regimes, and maybe in other soil types, they don't work at all. So it's a very important message that I also found during this experiment. But saw an interesting result that this chitin-enriched compost could actually improve plant available water.
Yeah. You have also conducted a field experiment at the same time, or during the same timing, experiments on compost additions. it's one of the amendments that you have also selected. But compost is also a commonly used amendment in real farming. So I think that would be also interesting if you can tell us more.
Yeah, so I followed up a long-term compost experiment. So in this experiment, only compost, no chitin. I think for the long-term experiments, it's hard to find a long-term experiment with like the novel soil amendments. So the one that I followed up here is a long-term compost experiment. It's based at ILVO, so it's the Flemish Research Institute for Agriculture, Food and Fisheries. And they have an experiment there where they are adding compost for more than 13 years to the same plots. So they have control plots without compost and then plots where they add on a yearly basis this compost for 13 years already. And that's the experiment that I followed up for an entire year as well, to have like the yearly budget. What is now the effect of nitrous oxide emissions, so greenhouse gas emissions? Is it affected by the addition of compost to soil? Yes or no? And since it's a long-term experiment, it allows us to evaluate the effects over a longer time scale than just the short-time greenhouse experiments that I have. And so I followed up those greenhouse gases during an entire year. And actually, a very interesting finding is that there were no significant differences in nitrous oxide emission from the plots with compost and from the plots without. So probably I'm the only one sitting here in your podcast that's happy to present a non-significant result. But it is a very promising result for farmers because it's applied quite often, this compost. It's also known that it can contribute to many soil structural properties. It's also a source of nutrients and so on and so on. But so we are able to add this compost to our plot without having significant increased emissions. So I was very happy with this result that I obtained at that experiment. Back to what we're doing today, so infiltration experiments. And in front of us we have actually the most basic device, I would say. Anyone who has an idea what it's called, this device? The double ring, yeah. Well, if you see it, you also directly see why it's called a double ring infiltrometer. So how does it work? Quite easily, we will fill both rings with water. The exact level of water doesn't matter that much, but the level in the inner and the outer ring needs to be the same. I'll come back later why this is the case. And of course, water will start to infiltrate in the soil, and we will keep track on how fast this water moves in our soil. How do we measure this? We have again a clock, the same as a few practical sessions ago when we measured hydraulic conductivity in the lab. So again, we have a clock to keep track of the time, and you can keep track of the water level using our floating ruler. So this floating ruler, this part will float on the water. So when the water is infiltrating, this ruler will drop, and you see that it has a scale, so you can keep track of the water level on this scale. Voila! The formula we will then use is the most easy one for all the devices that we have. It's the one on top of my sheet here. So the flux that we measure is equal to the field saturated hydraulic conductivity. Why field saturated? Because, well, of course, this amount of water will
start to saturate the soil, but probably not every pore becomes saturated with water. So that's why we call it field saturated, because it's almost saturated, I would say.
8.5. No, it's 8 point. 5 minutes, 5 seconds.
This one is at like 7.1. Maybe it's 1.5. Or maybe just like
She turned so after 1 minute of
7.7 enough. That's in addition. The outer is this. Inner is down to the
8. It's almost 8. Yeah, at 1 minute I'll click and then we'll see what
What was it? What was the first one? Huh?
after 1 minute. What was inside or outside? And then still this one is.
You're using only the inner reservoir, and I think it's already it's here. So you should let's use both of them, and then so for calculations you use the area of the big reservoir. And so I suppose now you can keep track.
1 minute now?
Yeah.
It's 12.
No,
yes, 12.
12.28. 45.
45, we do like 10 seconds or something and then we'll check. 3, 2, 1, I think.
44. Technical issues. Sorry. Technical difficulties.
It's going up.
1 minute.
61. It just went up. So I don't know.
I think it's 9.2. The best way would be
9.2?
remove the device and then measure it. Oh yeah, that's true.
You're also involved, alongside your PhD, you're also involved in teaching. How has balancing research and teaching shaped your perspective?
Yeah, so for me, it's a very enriching experience. I really like to teach, but besides the fact that I like to see how the students grow and how they learn certain things and so on, I also think it learned me so much. As a first thing, maybe how to explain yourself in front of a group. It's so important to practice this quite often. I know for like regular PhD, I would say, then there might be some opportunities to practice your presentation skills, but most times it's limited to a few times, maybe on a conference here or there. But I think presenting is something that it's really a skill. You have to do it quite often to really learn it. And well, if you're a teaching assistant and you have this opportunity, during the semester, you have the opportunity maybe 2-3 times a week. During the first semester, I teach a course where I have classes of, last semester, it was about 85 students at once. So you really learn how to speak in front of a big group. And I think that's a skill that I will use in all my work experiences after this, wherever I will work after this. But it's a skill that I will be able to use everywhere. And also, it learns you to think, how do I present my message? How will I make sure that the students will understand what I want, that they will be enthusiastic about what I'm talking about? Because I think there is nothing worse than someone who is standing in front of a group who does not have the enthusiasm and who cannot motivate students to participate or to work on the exercises. So all kinds of skills that you really learn due to this teaching. And I think is really valuable, and yeah, as I said, it will help me in future jobs to in whatever I'm doing.
For you, what is the best part of teaching experience?
The best parts, well, for me, of course, the best part is the class itself, the interaction with the students, trying to explain, seeing that they get it, seeing that they progress on the task, and so on and so on. For me, that's for sure the best thing. Yeah.
Lotte, thank you very much today for sharing your experience, as well as actually very enriching perspective. So, to sum up this episode, I have some general questions, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
So, just a few weeks ago, we celebrated International Day of Women and Girls in Science. So, I'm also honored today to have you on the podcast, as not only you have been successfully filling into the dual role of researching and teaching, also you are a young mother, which brings to my next question. How do you manage work-life balance across these roles?
Yeah, so for sure, that's a delicate balance. A child asks a lot of time from you. Of course, I want to give my child this time, but it's of course a balance between the work you have to do and the child. Of course, this is also valid for other jobs outside university too. But I have to say, doing a PhD, well, you want to obtain your degree, and you're the only one working on this project. And so if my son gets ill, then of course I stay home for him because I want to stay home for him and to be a good mom and to make sure he's better soon. But every day that he's ill, I'm also unable to work on my PhD while my deadline remains the same day. So it's a constant struggle between wanting to make sure that you have a good PhD, but also wanting to be a good mom and to take care of your kids while you're working on this PhD. But of course, it ambitious your life also in a lot of other ways. But the combination with PhD is often challenging, and it also for me it brought some extra stress in such a way that I'm very much aware every hour that I'm in my office here at university that I know I have to spend this hour well. And before I had a kid, of course I worked hard and I did my job and so on. But now I know very much this is an hour that I can use. So I have to work efficiently and to make the best out of this 1 hour that I have. And that's a feeling that really appeared once I had my child. So in a certain way, I became way more efficient since I have a kid. So, well, it has a good side too.
As a follow-up question, so how does academia respond to women who choose to have children during their doctoral research? Because I'm actually, again, I have to say, very honored to have you today because it's often overlooked, perhaps.
Yeah, I think indeed at university we have a different culture towards having kids during your PhD life compared to other sectors in other jobs in society. It's only, for example, when I announced that I was pregnant, and first of all, I want to stress that all colleagues are very nice to me. They were very happy for me and so on. So they didn't have bad intentions at all, but just to show you what's the culture related to having kids during PhD is the reactions that I got when I said that I was pregnant. And for example, one of these reactions was, will you take up all the maternity leave? Or why would you do that? I really got that question. And also, well, I'm currently pregnant with the second child. And then I got a reaction, wow, so close on the first one. This must be an accident. And it's just to illustrate, because all those people who told me these things, they all meant very well, and they are good friends of me, and I know they have the best intentions, so no blame at all. But just to show you what's the idea of having children in university or doing a PhD, and I think that's also reflected in the numbers. If we take a look to, for example, female professors, I recently saw an article where I saw that in Belgium about 1/3 of the professors are female, while during PhD about half of the PhD students are women. And I think this is, well, you can't see both things disconnected to each other. At a certain time or at a certain age, as a woman, you have to ask yourself, do I want children? And then often it might be conflicting with your with the things you want to achieve at work, and I think that's also reflected in that way. Yeah, and I think so. First of all, I don't want to blame anything because everyone was very happy for me. But things that are important is that we discuss this, and that it's maybe also a bit further normalized that kids can appear during your PhD, and that it's not just a delay of some of the work, but that's also an enrichment for society and for the mother itself. And maybe what I also thought about was where I had some struggles with already is, well, of course, if you're pregnant, then you'll be away for some time. So maybe some other colleagues have to take over some of the work. Also, the moment you're pregnant, you can't enter the lab anymore. So probably you can't do all your tasks anymore as good as before. And I think that's also one of the things that we really need to address, is that all my colleagues are so busy working that it's hard to ask them to do something extra because I can't do it anymore due to my pregnancy. And I think that's also a main message I wanted to share, that for me, sometimes it felt hard during pregnancy to ask colleagues, can you help me with this or that, because they are so busy. So maybe we also have to see, or to make sure that we reduce the workload for everyone a bit, so that if someone gets pregnant, that there's more flexibility among the staff to kind of distribute tasks or whatever.
I also want to ask you, as a PhD who has done teaching alongside also doing your research and alongside also being a mother, actually it's a very dynamic role. I don't know how you manage. I'm barely managing my PhD experience. So what skills you believe are essential for PhD students to have or develop?
Well, first of all, if you are thinking about doing a PhD, I think maybe it's the most basic thing, but I think it's very important that you really love to do research. And secondly, that you really love the topic you would work on. Normally PhD, depending on in which country you're doing it, but 3 to 4 years to complete it. Well, 4 years are long if you don't like your topic. I'm really convinced that you need to love the thing that you're doing, otherwise it's hard to complete it. And then the main skill you need is, I think, is perseverance, the strength to keep going on. In my pot experiments, the thing that I talked about in the beginning of this episode, I have many results where I had bad results or non-significant results. Well, this is science. This happens. So sometimes you do a certain treatment and nothing comes out. And then you need the strength to go on to try to make the best out of this data, even though if the results might be conflicting literature or everything you thought this certain treatment would cause. So I think perseverance is for sure the the most important thing you need as a PhD student.
Any advice for incoming PhDs?
Oh, this is actually related to what I said in the previous question. I would say, I would, well, in my opinion, I would just say, besides the thing I said before, make sure in the beginning you have a lot of good appointments with your different promoters, so that it's very clear what you're going to do, that you have a very good starting situation. I would say that you know very well how to start with it, because the moment you start to have experiments and you start to have data, then often things become clear for you too. But in the beginning, or at least for me in the beginning, it was a large search. How do I start? How do I do this? How do I develop my topic? And so on and so on. Well, I have to add, of course, that, well, I started during the COVID period. So we were all at home with online meetings and so on. So for me, this was, for me personally, this was hard to start this way. I think these days, when you're able to come to the office and to talk with everyone, it might be a bit easier. But for sure, in the beginning, don't be afraid to ask for help or to discuss with colleagues or to make sure that your topic is developing in the beginning nicely.
Yeah. Thank you again, Lotte. I, as I said, quite honored to have you also to reflect on often overlooked questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.